it just hasn't gone as planned thus far. And you wonder, okay, where does it start? And I think you have to look at the quarterback. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today we have some devastating injury news. Talking about Cleveland Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson. He will be out for the remainder of the season with a shoulder injury. Now, before we get into the trade, because I do want to talk about the Cleveland Browns a little bit. I want to talk about Deshaun a little bit. I want to talk about the future outlook of the season because it's not over. They still have some football to play and they're in the playoff picture. But I just want to say, before I get into the opening statement which they released this morning, and I want to know if you guys agree with me on this topic. I feel like there's 10 to 15 of my favorite players who are also elite players in the game of football. I can go with Matt Milano. I can go with Aaron Rodgers. I can go with Trayvon Diggs, a Tre'Davious White, a Nick Chubb. That's 5, just at the snap of a finger. So I can do something like that and say, okay, it feels like the injury bug has hit us a little harder this season. It feels like the injuries have hit a little closer to home this season. Some of our favorite players that we love to see on the football field, they're out. And it's not nagging injuries. It's not an ankle sprain. It's not a wrist injury. It's not a shoulder injury. It's more so we're looking at it and saying, okay, we're looking at ACL, some of these big time injuries. And for Deshaun Watson, it's a shoulder injury. But I think that you look at these other players, a torn Achilles for Aaron Rodgers, it just feels like it's been upped this season when we talk about these injuries for sustainable amounts of time. And I just want to give my heartfelt condolences to all of those guys because I know therapy, physical therapy, coming back, getting from those injuries, getting back on the football field, and just feeling like yourself again. It's not something easy to do in the game of football. So just wanted to give something out to those guys. And I want to know if you think that down below in the comments. Do you agree with me on that topic? Now, so the first thing I'm thinking, I want to know what you guys are thinking. But I'm feeling like before it can even get started with this team, before it can even get started with Deshaun Watson, it's ended. And then this is the past 3 seasons. We talk about last year, Deshaun Watson came back, played a couple games last year, but we gave him a grace period. We said he's not going to be himself. He hasn't been on a football field and played with his guys for a very, very long time. And then we look at the season before that, suspended for the duration of the season, had off the field management. So now we come into this and say, okay, in this season, we got a lot of things going. We got Amari Cooper, one of the best route runners in football, absolutely. We got some of these other guys like a Nick Chubb. We have the best defense in football statistically and the eye test. They've been passing that. So we're looking at all of these things that we have going. David Njoku's been a great tight end for this team. I think that you had the weapons. You bring in Elijah Moore as well. I have to add that in there. But it just hasn't gone as planned thus far. And you wonder, okay, where does it start? And I think you have to look at the quarterback. Has Deshaun Watson lived up to the $230 million contract, fully guaranteed? And has he been worth all of the trade capital which they traded to bring him into Cleveland? Now, talking about this season, Deshaun Watson in 6 games played has 1,115 yards, 7 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and a 44.7 QBR scale of 1 to 100. Now, you look at these stats and say, okay, it's not popping the eye test. He's not an MVP consideration. He's not really even the best quarterback in his own division. But I think we have to look at this and say, okay, the drives, specific moments. And when we say, is he worth it? I think that we can say both yes and no, because I'm looking at the drives, game-winning drives versus the Baltimore Ravens. Only a handful of quarterbacks can make those throws. Only a handful of quarterbacks can get the football down the field in the second half like he did. He was extremely efficient in the second half. And it's kind of crazy because in the first half, he had probably one of the worst quarterback performances you would ever see. But came back, bounced back, stayed resilient in that game, and they ended up winning it 33-31. So I said, okay, now we're in a situation where we don't have a guy like that. We're looking at PJ Walker. We're looking at DTR. DTR is a rookie. He was electric in the preseason, but he's still a rookie. And this is a team that has high aspirations and goals. Like we talk about it, the AFC North is thick. We got the Pittsburgh Steelers. We got the Cincinnati Bengals. We got the Baltimore Ravens. And I think this was really one of the times you probably could have seen a team, all 4 teams, making the playoffs in the division. But I think this season we have to see how it goes. Now, interesting thing I want to note about Deshaun. On September 29, 2023, a shoulder-to-shoulder injury was reported for Deshaun Watson. So we said, okay, we had some of these shoulder rumblings early on, and we were talking about strains, rotator cuffs. It was in that conversation then. Now we say, okay, this is something that has been lingering. And remember, Deshaun Watson has only played in 6 games thus far, and we could say he's 4-1 as a starter, or we could say he's 5-1, but he only threw 5 passes in the game versus the Indianapolis Colts. So I'm looking at all of this and saying, okay, regardless of what we think about the team, They beat Baltimore, they beat Cincinnati, and they beat Pittsburgh, sitting them at 6-3, and also beating every team in their division. Now, you don't have a guy like Deshaun Watson who can make that drive in the fourth quarter, who can make that comeback effort like he did against the Baltimore Ravens. Like I said, you're looking at PJ and you're looking at DTR. So now at minimum, we're thinking, okay, what can we really get for a return? What is the ceiling of this team with a Deshaun Watson-led offense? And we have the defense. We have Jim Schwartz. Now we're leaning on those guys. We got you the $230 million. We got you your big-time contract. We got the draft picks to trade for you. We did all of this to bring you in. We got 3 more years guaranteed of you. Now, we have that 4th year, but that could be a void year. So I'm looking at all of this and saying, okay, it's 2023. The clock is ticking to 2026. And really for the future draft status, this is why I talk about the outlook of the season, because they have to salvage whatever they can. PJ Walker has to step up. Now, I'm going to make an interesting point a little later, but I think that when we go into the 2024 NFL draft, it's no way that we can just say this season is done because, of course, they don't have their first round pick. Houston has that over there. So now we say, okay, we got 1 second-round pick, 1 third-round pick, 2 fifth-rounders, 2 sixth-rounders, and 2 seventh-rounders for the Cleveland Browns. And when we say we're bringing in PJ Walker, because I believe he's slated as the starter, he's had more snaps within this offense. Right now in the season, he has 618 yards, a touchdown, and 5 interceptions, a 24.4 quarterback rating. And this is not just bashing on PJ Walker. This is saying, okay, this is a guy that hasn't played his best football. And I go back to San Francisco, a game where he didn't play a great performance, but we say, okay, get a shot play down to Amari Cooper. Get your tight ends the football a little bit. We're going to run the football with a Jerome Ford, and all you got to do is throw a couple of screen passes. Now we're going to play defense. We got Martin Emerson Jr. We got Grant Delpit. We got Denzel Ward, Myles Garrett, etc., JOK. But now we're saying, okay, this is a guy, can we trust him in those biggest playoff moments? Now, for reference, Zach Wilson has a 34.2 QBR. PJ Walker has a 24.4 QBR. So we talk about some of the worst quarterback play in the league. And like I said, this is a guy, he was great in the XFL. We talk about these different types of things. He's had stints. He's been given opportunities. Carolina Panthers, Indianapolis Colts. So I'm rooting for these guys, and I hope they can save the season because, like I said, you don't have a first rounder. What is there to really hang your hat on in that aspect? Now, Browns remaining schedule. They go versus Pittsburgh. So they got to go down there to Pittsburgh, at Denver in the next game, at the LA Rams versus Jacksonville versus Chicago, at Houston versus the New York Jets, at Cincinnati. So I think we say, okay, confidently, the biggest game that we look at and say we have a shot is versus the Chicago Bears and versus the New York Jets. These are 2 teams where we say, okay, now I think outside of that, I got to go at Cincinnati. I got to go versus Jacksonville. I got to go to the LA Rams at Denver. Denver has been playing much better. Russell Wilson has been having a quiet, very good season. But I think when we go versus Pittsburgh in the next game, we know that's a division matchup. That's going to be a dogfight when we talk about those 2 teams. And I think at Houston, the way CJ Stroud is playing, I mean, what can we really say? I've already dropped the video talking about CJ Stroud. So they're going into that environment down there in Houston. It's a tough schedule that you really look at. But like I said, they have a defense which they can hang their hat on. And hopefully, I'm not going to say the defense will fall off of a cliff like we've seen with some other teams when the offense is not up to par, because their offense really hasn't been the best thus far, with or without Deshaun. So I'm saying, okay, we got the number 1 defense in total yards allowed. We got the number 1 third down defense for Cleveland, the number 7 rush defense, the number 1 passing defense, number 8 in takeaways per game, and we're tied for 4th in sacks per game. This is what they're going to try to lean their hat on. And it's funny because you know what? Josh Dobbs was on this team at one point in time. He could have saved this team just the way that he's playing for the Minnesota Vikings. I have to talk about that a little later in another video, but I just think that to see him doing what he's doing and thinking, okay, we could have had this guy in Cleveland with the weapons that we have, just would have been something nice to see, a funny little story. But overall, though, what do you think about this injury? What do you think it means for Deshaun Watson, how we haven't really gotten started, and now we're going into year 4 next season? He's out for the remainder of this season, and next year it's going to be the same thing. Okay, get back to that level of football that we saw for the Houston Texans. Okay, we have the weapons, and now we're looking at you. We don't have that much more time for grace periods, for maturation processes, for getting this ready. It's time to play football, and it's time to do it now at an extremely high level because they made this trade with intentions of winning a Super Bowl. I can confidently say that 100% confirm that is what they've been trying to do when they went and got Deshaun Watson. So I want to know what you guys think. What do you think about the injury? Do you think that because this was something lingering early on in the season, because he's missed a couple games, people were questioning, does he want to get back on the football field? And does this also beg the question, did he rush himself back on the football field to try to go out there and win football games with his guys? I think there's a lot of room for speculation, a lot of different things we can talk about, but also we're saying now, okay, what can the Cleveland Browns do to get to that next level and try to win a Super Bowl? Does it result in Deshaun Watson playing better? Does it result in him just getting healthy, playing these games? Because like I said, they're 4-1, or we could say 5-1 with Deshaun as a starter. They were right in the thick of things in this division. So that's going to do it for today's show. Talking about the trade, it's a devastating one. Like I said, we've seen the injury bug hit home and hit so many elite players this season. So it's just something that's frustrating. When we see it, like I said, I named those guys in the beginning. But like I said, that's going to do it for today's show. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe as always. And now